Alright guys, so some more teasers were shown today, specifically balanced teasers, talking about creatures, transformations, as well as talk about the enhanced versions of shad spells. Now, I'm going to continue on this discussion. I believe there should have already been a teaser that went out today talking about the balanced ones from Sunsword. A lot of people are uploading their own variations of teasers this entire week, so this is just the start of the week. So today was Daniel Sunsword's teasers with the balanced spells, and he kind of went over in his video. The link to the original video will be down below in the comments or the description. You know what I mean, just down below, and show support to the original video to help him grow his channel and everything like that. You know, we show support to other creators, of course. But we are going to continue that discussion and give you guys my thoughts and opinions and kind of expand on it, because not everyone understands shadow packs, not everyone understands certain icons, hanging effects, whatnot. So I want to try to deep dive into it a little bit more and explain, of course. But as I said, be on the lookout for more teasers later this week. I will be doing mine as well, and that will be on Sunday. So if you want to see my teasers and you want to see what Storm looks like, tune in Sunday on the 12th of October, and I will be doing my teasers, of course, as well. But let's go over the Shadow Pack system as a whole and kind of giving you a better visual and trying to explain it to you visually, right? So I kind of made some slides in preparation for this video, and I'm going to be doing the same for all the other videos whenever I do cover them, to kind of show examples of how this system works. So let's pull up a slide that I made earlier today talking about shadow packs, specifically on balance, right? This is just going to be showcasing on balance, but each school is getting a transformation, a creature, as well as all the previous spells that had shads in them, like for example sandworm, etc. Those spells were originally shads. They were getting those shads removed, and you can combine them to regain that shad, which you guys will see in a bit. But the shadow transformation that balance got is Shadow Trickster. Now this is like a polymorph similar to like Shrike, of course. So what it does, it gives you 25% damage outgoing, as well as it steals a pip from the target, as well as you get a bounce pip. And then the Shadow Pact is you have to have blades on yourself. So that is the transformation. Now, a lot of people thought this was an aura. It is not an aura. It is part of a transformation. It's like if you're using Shrike, right? Shrike is what gives you pierce, and that's why people use it, and damage. This Shadow Trickster is doing the exact same thing, but instead it's just giving you 25% outgoing damage. So if someone puts like a attenuate on you, that doesn't mean your transformation's replaced or anything like that. It's not like the transformation itself is not giving you an aura, it's giving you stats. So just remember that. So when the packed icon means that there's blades on yourself, every round it's going to be taking a blade off of you, right? Take it as like you start off with a 0% lash, right? Now every time you do not have a blade on you, and this will last 3 rounds, right, it will take away 5% of your max HP. And this 5% of your max HP is going to be taken at the end of its transformation, at the end of the pact. So after 3 rounds, right? At the end of 3 rounds. So every time you don't have a blade, it will lose 5%. And it's going to take away a blade per round. So if it will check, do you have a blade? Yes? Okay, we'll just take away the blade. Oh, you do not have a blade? Oh, we are going to take away 5% of your max HP. So that's like the caveat with the whole Shadow Pack system. Same thing with the Shadow Creature. This is kind of like a natural attack. So what it does, I know it's a wall of text. I know there's so many memes going around with this one. I kind of expected it once I saw this. I was like, this is the memeable spell. But it does 75 shadow damage. And then what it does, it gives you a plus 35% chromatic pierce blade. So if you're using this, for example, on a bounce, it'll give you a bounce blade. Of course, it's not going to be exactly 35%. Because for balance wizards it's going to be slightly less, because that's just how majority of chromatic spells work. And then it's going to give you a weaving trap, and it's going to give you 2 of those. So just remember, with weaving trap, it's based upon what school you're weaved into. Now of course, I believe what's going to happen is if you're just weaved into, for example, like nothing, it should just give you a universal trap. But I would assume the percentage of trap is going to be a little bit lower, since it's going to be universal. But if you are weaved in the correct school, for example, let's say fire, it will give you a 35 fire trap. Kind of straightforward. And then the Shadow Pact is you have to have shields on yourself. So per round, it's going to take away a shield. If you do not have a shield, it's going to take away your HP up to max of 15%. So kind of straightforward of a system. I know it's overwhelming. KI is going to have a tutorial in game and showcase that. Of course, whenever that tutorial comes out in test realm, I will showcase it and give you guys my thoughts and opinions and kind of elaborate a little bit more. So hopefully you can get a better understanding. So that's the Shadow Pack system, just told for example. And these are the ones that were given to balance, of course, and you know, or shown with balance, is that you get that transformation of Shadow Trickster, you get that Shadow Creature, which is Dark Trickster. Now here comes the, I guess, like the fusing part. So let's start off with Gaze of Fate. Right now, Gaze of Fate currently what it does in game, and we'll slightly go over some of these spells as well in game and give you guys like a better representation, is what it does is it does damage, and then it does a random school, and then it gives a bubble. And if you have the advanced combat version, it does damage, does chromatic damage based upon the enemy you're fighting. So if I'm fighting, let's just say an ice wizard, right, it's going to do ice damage, and then on top of that it gives you that bubble. Of course, this is for a shad. So this is what it currently works in game. Now, this is an example of what it would look like in the future, right, when this update happens. Now, you guys can see on the left, I put an image of the current version of Gaze of Fate that's currently in game, as well as I showed a mock image of what it would look like in your hand if you had a variation of Gaze of Fate with Dark Trickster in your hand. Because this is just what it will look like. It's not going to look exactly like this too verbatim. Of course, the color palette is going to be slightly adjusted, of course. But at the bottom right, you guys can see there's a section called New Trained and Shadow Trains. So that's the new version of Gaze of Fate. There's a version where it's like a hit and a random school damage and into a bubble, a balanced bubble, which is still the 5 pits, so just loses its shad. And there's another variation of Gaze of Fate where it does a certain amount of damage, and then it does chromatic damage based upon who you're fighting. So if you're fighting an ice wizard, it's going to do ice damage. Then it will proceed to gambit up to 3 traps, and then it will give you a 45 blade per gambit. So if there's 3 traps on the enemy, you can gambit them all and get 3 45% blades. So that's the difference between path A and path B, I guess you can say, or tier 1, tier 2 of Gaze of Fate. Then you have the shadow variation of Gaze of Fate, where you combine it with a Shadow Trickster, any version of Gaze of Fate, and you can pick which outcome you want. So the left version of the Shadow Train Gaze of Fate, it is 520 balance damage, then random school damage, so pick a random school and we'll do that, and then it will give you a 25% balance bubble. And the Shadow Pact is you have to have traps on the enemy. So each round it will take away a trap on the enemy. If there's no traps on the enemy, it will proceed to take 5% of your HP per round, and this is max, but it'll take all that HP at the end of its action once the Shadow Pact's over. Then you have the other image of Gaze of Fate, which does 370 bounce damage and then chromatic damage based upon the target, and then it will give you 3 blades that are 50% each of them. So 3 50% blades, and then the Shadow Pact is traps on the enemy, so same thing applies. So the thing is with the system you need to understand is that you can pick the variation of you want as the fusion. So for example, if I want to have the bubble variation of Gaze of Fate in my deck, and let's say I want the fused variation of Gaze of Fate to be the one that's allowed in advanced combat, you can pick the one that's allowed in advanced combat and you can use the bubble. And whenever you have the bubble variation of Gaze of Fate and Dark Trickster in your hand, you can combine that and it will create the outcome of the advanced combat variation. So you can pick the fusion variation you want, and you can pick whatever Gaze of Fate you want to use. So that will kind of deteriorate whatever. So if I want a certain fusion as my outcome, you can pick that one. And if I want to use a certain version of Gaze of Fate, you can pick that one too. So it adds a little bit more variety, and kind of, there's going to be a lot of different builds when it comes to like deck builds and stuff to use any variation of these. Of course, when it comes to like PvP advanced combat, you're always going to lean towards the advanced combat allowed variation of Gaze of Fate. But when it comes like to your regular Gaze of Fate, which one are you going to be packing? It really depends on you. Majority of people are probably going to use the hit and bub because it's a 5-hit hit and bub. But there could be some people using the other variation of Gaze of Fate where you gambit traps for blades. So a lot of variety, and hopefully that example kind of shows what you want. So you guys can see in the example I wrote, you can choose which fusion you want the outcome to be. So for example, if I chose a right side of the Shadow Train version of Gaze of Fate, so for example the one that's allowed in advanced combat, I can choose the one that has a bubble and I can combine it with Dark Trickster, and I will create the Shadow Train version of Gaze of Fate that is allowed in advanced combat. So cool little interesting thing that they're doing with the whole Shadow Packs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we continue on in this video. But yeah, that's Gaze of Fate, and we can kind of move on to the other spells that were also changed, because this is just one of the examples. Of course, I wanted to start off the video by explaining some systems, and then we can move on with the rest of the video and hopefully get a better understanding. If not, I'm gonna try my best to explain in the comment section down below, because I know it's a new system, it's gonna be like this, and even when I explain my teasers in on Sunday or whatnot, I will have to do a lot more explaining too. So that's what I'm going to try to do every day, is kind of comment and continue on what the other content creator has already done with their teasers, and kind of elaborate more into like symbols and whatnot, and give you guys my opinion and stuff. So now that we got Gaze of Fate out the way, let's start talking about the other spells. And the first one I want to talk about is Nested Fury. Now, Nested Fury currently in game, what it does, if we go visit it real quick, at max tier it does 825 ice damage, or 990 fire damage, or 1070 storm damage for 6 pips, of course, as well as shad. And then the path B, what it does is it does 550 bounce damage, and then it puts a negative aura of minus 30% outgoing that lasts 4 rounds. And of course, if you split this amongst multiple targets, this percentage is going to be lower. I know it doesn't say it on the card, but it's just something that you just know from multiple selecting targets. I wish in the future, whenever we get I guess, better spell text, in my opinion, when you right click a card, I feel like it should show you what happens if you split it against multiple targets. And I feel like that should be like something that's in here when you right click a card. That's just my take. But the current version of, or like the new version of Nested Fury, I like to say, is it no longer has a shad, of course. So what it does now at max tier does 450 ice damage, and then 535 fire, or 660 storm damage. And I know some people are wondering, is this still going to be viable? Like, would you use this? Well, if we go back real quick into Live Realm and we look at Nova's 7 pips, and you know, you are doing 665 at base. At max you're doing 725. Now it really depends. I know some people might make the argument, well, it's going to be good against bosses that are balanced, and that's honestly fair. But at a certain point, you probably will just swap off both of these and start using, for example, Rainbow Serpent round 1. But at a certain point, you can make arguments for Nested Fury being viable for this top path for a casual play. It really just comes down to it. It's still good. It's viable, right? Don't get me wrong. It is viable, and at least you don't have to worry about that shad. But when we talk about the shad enhanced version, you'll see what I'm talking about. And the new path B, let's go back into the spell or whatnot. But the new path B, what it does is 410 bounce damage, and then it gambits 2 hots, and each gambit will give you 2 minus 70 shields. So if you gambit 2 hots, you're gonna have 4 tower shields that are minus 70%, which is crazy to even think about. But you can split this against multiple targets and whatnot. You still will need hots on you to even activate the gambit, so just be wary about that. Now let's venture into the fusion portion, and this is where it gets dicey, and I have to explain this. I really do, and I'm not too sure many people realize this. There are paths on this fusion. Yes, so if you get where I'm coming from, you can kind of get a better understanding of what I'm about to say. But this means there will be spelemental paths for fusions. And this, not many people will realize this unless you quite literally look carefully. Because when we have fusions in the past, it was a set damage and whatnot. That's just strictly how it was. This has paths. This literally has paths. So the spellament used to I'm just going to read verbatim what I was told. The spellament path used to upgrade the shadow enhanced version will be a separate spellament, which is created using spellament from the base version, which is, yeah. With spell fusion, you're making a new spell out of 2 component spells. So all 3 have potential to have tiers, but in this case, we don't have plans to add spelemental paths to creature spells. Take that information with what you will. But yes, so if you guys haven't, definitely get to farming your spelements. If you think you already have enough for tier 5, that is not enough. You need to get more spelements, because you're going to need it to enhance your fusion spelements, essentially. So get to it if you guys haven't. But this is a controversial topic which definitely wasn't dived into, and I don't think other content creators have quite visually realized that by seeing this. When you see, for example, the tiers of Gaze of Fate, you're probably like, oh, it's just, you know, you can swap between them, whatnot. You don't really think much of it. But now that you guys have seen Nested Fury, you're gonna realize, hey, this is crazy. Why are we farming more spell-elements? And I will talk about it more on my teaser video as well as other teaser videos. But yes, this is a topic that needs to be dived into, because the fact is, that literally means we have to farm more spell-elements than we already have. We're going further beyond tier 5, and if we ever get fusions that have a tier 4 and a 5, I think a lot of people are going to be upset. The spell limit grind is already abysmal, and it's going to be even worse. Unless these spell limits are semi-easy to get in future, no, it really isn't. And I think the community will be quite upset. So if you guys haven't realized it, now you know. So not going to dive too much into it. Maybe save it for a separate video, whatnot. If you guys have made it this far into the video, just wanted to remind you guys that 75% of you guys that watch me on a daily basis are not subscribed. So do me a huge favor and subscribe. We're on that grind to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. All right, now let's get back into the rest of the video. But let's get into the variations of nested. So if you have top path fusion, what it's going to be is you're going to need dark trickster. You're going to combine that with nested fury, and you'll be able to get this top path. And top path, what it does 100 and or no 100 1.1k, or what it seems like, because I have like super tiny on my screen. Yeah, 1.1k of one of the elemental schools, and then it's going to give you 2 minus 75% tower shields. And just remember, this is an AoE, so that's that. And then the shadow pact is you have to have hots on yourself. So if you don't have hots on yourself every round for 3 rounds, you will lose 5% of your HP. So stacking up. So if you didn't have a hot all 3 rounds, that's minus 15% of your max HP. So be wary about that and try to remember that to the best of your abilities. And then we have the advanced combat path, which, I mean, of course, you can use that in casual PvE as well, but majority of people will be using it for advanced. And what it does, it's a 745 balance damage hit, which is select target, and it's going to give you 5 tower shields that are minus 75%. And the same thing, Shadow Pact is you have to have hots on yourself. So if somebody clears your hots while you have this active and stuff like that, you're going to be losing your HP. So pay attention to what you're doing and whatnot. Now we can move on to Sandworm. Now Sandworm, what it currently does in game, if we quickly just look at it right now, is it's a divide. And I've kind of said this back in February. I don't think these should be divides. I'm just going to be honest. I think these should be 4 pip AoEs. I'm not too much of a fan of the divide, right? I mean, we have select target, but I've always said take off the divide and make these 4 pip AoEs. Honestly, I really think they should be, but this is what it currently is in game. And then you have path B, which is 365 damage, and it gives you 240% traps. And that's where we're at right now currently with Sandworm. So the new path of Sandworm, which is just no shad. Remember, this is the no shad variation. At max tier, it's doing 280 select target, and it's putting a 35% trap. Yes, you can potent trap this if you want to. I know some people are trying to make arguments beyond that and saying like, well, this will be viable if you use potent trap on it. I think there has to be a very situational fight. Then you have path B, which is if you gambit 2 blades, you can get a trap per gambit. So if you gambit 2 blades, you will get 255% universal traps. Now that one's actually semi decent, but it does require you to have blades and very situational, like I said. So very different takes when it comes to what they're doing, and they're sticking with the select target. I was really hoping for path A to be an AoE. I genuinely was, but sad to say. Now let's go over into the fusion portion where you use your shad and you combine it with Sandworm. So if you were to have the top path at max tier, it's doing 900 balance damage, and then it's putting a singular 55 trap on the enemy. And then the pact is you have to have blades on yourself. So it's going to check per round and see if you have blades. If you do not have blades, it's just going to see if you have 1. You don't need to have like 9 million blades on you, just need 1, right? Or at least technically 3 in this case to fulfill the entire pact, right? But it will check if you have a blade, and if you don't have a blade, you will lose 5% of your max HP per round, of course. So round 1, let's say you had a blade, cool, you don't lose HP. Round 2, you do not have a blade, oh, well, you just lost 5% of your max HP. Round 3, let's say I don't have a blade, oh, now I'm at minus 10% of my max HP. So that's how the pact system works. I'm always going to be talking about that throughout the video so people get a better understanding. And then we have bottom path Sandworm, which is doing 580 bounce damage. And then it's going to give you 3, basically a fuel of a universal trap that is 55% traps. And on top of that, the pact is blades on you. So same thing as I was talking about earlier, same system applies here. Another spell that got changed, if we venture back into live realm, is Mockenspiel. Now, Mockenspiel, definitely, it was kind of an interesting spell at max tier. So at max tier, it was a 7 pip spell, and it was doing 1 to 1.2k damage, and it would convert your elemental and spirit blades into different blades. That's basically the premise of it. So it would convert those into balanced blades essentially. And then we had path B, which was 470 bounce damage, and it would put 2 weaknesses on the target. Now, this is going to be slightly altered, and it's no longer going to be a 5, 6, 7 spell. You know, like there's different tiers of this that increase the pip value. Now it's a static pip value. So the new Mockenspiel at max tier, it's doing 435 bounce damage, and then it's going to convert any 3 blades to another set of blades. So bounce blades, for example. And then path B, what it does is it does 355 bounce damage, and it gambits 2 damage overtimes on the target. So if I put 2 damage overtimes on my enemy, it will gambit those and put 2 weaknesses that are minus 40%. So if I have 2 dots on the enemy, it's going to take those 2 dots and it's going to put 4 minus 40% weaknesses. So per gambit, it's putting 2 weaknesses. So if I had 2 damage overtimes, it's going to put 4 weaknesses on the target that are minus 40%. So you can kind of see where this game is going, where like utilities are definitely shaking up the ideology on a lot of things, and it's something that, you know, it's kind of interesting. Honestly, it's kind of interesting. Now we can move on to the shadow variations of this, which is the fusions. 100, or I was about to say 100, 1.1k bounce damage hit that also, which does this 9 times. It turns any blade to another blade. It's a bounce blade. So it does it 9 times. So it's still the original spell. It's just doing it more times now. So, hey. And then the Shadow Pact is you need damage over times on the enemy. So if you don't have a damage over time on the enemy per round, you will be losing 5% of your max HP. So kind of annoying to set up, in my opinion. But if you can pull it off, it really has some value in it. So there's that. And then of course there's the bottom path variation of this fusion, which is 690 bounce damage, and then 5 minus 45% weaknesses on the enemy. And same Shadow Pact applies, which is, hey, you got to have damage over times on the enemy. Yeah. The weaknesses go crazy. I mean, you will be having to pack Trickster to even fuse it, and I know some people might have a reason to use just like the regular variation, just because you are just gaming dots and just free weaknesses. So you could just, like, for example, if someone's shielding, just put on an elf. You got 2 dots, pretty straightforward, and now you can just gamble those dots and put a gazillion weaknesses on the enemy, because why not? And that's on the base version, of course. When it comes to the fusion, you have to have 3 dots in total technically, and you'll need it each per round. So something to be wary about. And then the last bounce spell that got changed when it came to the shad spells, at least, is Old One's Endgame. Now, Old One's Endgame, I have been looking forward to quite a lot. I feel like ever since the spell came out, I honestly was a fan. It looked cool animation-wise, right? Not talking about what it did or whatnot. Animation-wise, it was a cool spell. And genuinely, I was hoping for a day that this can be actually useful. And is it still useful? You guys can be the judge of that. But currently what it does in game is, and same thing with the Lemuria spells, they do this, is it starts off as a 6 pip, then 7 pip, then 8 pip. So at max tier, when it was doing 8 pips and a shad damage, or sorry, shad pip, it was doing 970 bounce damage, and then it will give you a convert that is a blade. So it's a convert blade. It will convert your bounce, your next bounce hit, into a random school. So that was a thing. And then path B, which I'll be honest, I don't even know if anyone's using, but 560 balance damage, or 560, and then it would put a bomb on the enemy that was 270, that would last 3 rounds. So after 3 rounds, that bomb would detonate. So that was Old One's endgame, and that's what it is currently in game. But if we look at the new Old One's endgame, you can see that every version of the spell is 6 pips, and then at max tier, it is an AoE, so I will have to preface this is an AoE. It is doing 420 bounce damage, and then it gives you a convert blade again. Now, same thing applies, as I said earlier, with the other AoEs. You're just gonna use Nova. You're really just gonna use Nova. Nova does way more. At base power, Nova does 665. And it has no utility, of course. You gotta remember, the 7 pip AoEs don't even have utilities on them. Old One's endgame is giving you a utility, and at max tier, it's still doing less. And you get Old One's endgame further down the line in the quest tree. So, like, you're really not going to be using Old One's endgame, I'll be honest, at least path A. But path B, what it does is it is 390 bounce damage, and then it gambits a shield for a hot. So it is going to be a 500, and I think that's 530 hot that lasts 5 rounds. Yeah, And this is just the start of it for advanced combat, because when we venture into the advanced combat where it comes to like the other, you know, the fusions and whatnot, let me show you guys that real quick. So Old One's endgame top path with a shad. So if you combine Old One's endgame with Dark Trickster, it's gonna do 980 now, which still, I mean, hey, at least it's more damage than, I guess, Power Nova currently. So there's that. So at least you can, if you for some reason have a shad, you can at least use it more than Power Nova, and it will do more damage, whatnot. But then it will require you to have shields on yourself. Yeah, you need shields on yourself, and it will take your HP if you don't have shields on yourself. But then if we look at path B for the fusion, which is really strong in my opinion, I guess it depends on how you view it, but 780 balance damage, and then it gives you a 1520 hot that lasts 4 rounds, and that's 2 hots. That is 2 hots. What? When I saw this, I was like, dude, this is just the new celestial spell. I mean, I'll put an image on screen real quick of what they did to this. I forgot the name of it. It's like the spiritual tribunal. That's what I was trying to think of. It's just the new spiritual tribunal, just slightly altered. Yeah, yeah. But you guys let me know what you guys think of all these shadow packs. Hopefully I explained it to the best of my abilities, and I'm gonna try my best, because I know this is a new system. Now, not everyone's gonna understand it, whatnot, and it's gonna take time for people to learn the whole system as a whole. But that is shadow packs in a nutshell. And you will need spellments. That you just will need spellments to be using these fusion paths. And I know some people are gonna ask, well, what if I don't have you know, let's just say I have tier 1 of the fusion. It's still going to let you fuse, but it's only going to let you, whenever you do fuse it, it's just going to give you the tier 1 version. And if you don't have the one that's allowed in advanced combat, it's not going to allow you to fuse. So you need to at least get spellments enough to get it to tier 2 to be able to pick the path that you want, and then you can pick the advanced combat path and then fuse it, and then you can get the advanced combat version of Old One's endgame, or just as an example. All right, post editing Almond here. I know I don't really do this, it doesn't really happen that much, but I forgot to include the teaser that was showed a couple days ago, which was related to Darkmoor. Now, I won't take up too much of your guys' time, but literally in that video I talked about how that's the final 2 factions. There's not going to be another faction. I really doubt it, but there actually is, and it's the humans. Yeah, okay. So it's not part of the original factions or whatnot, I guess, of the tarot card system. You know how that works, right? But it's just called the Outsiders. So I'll show an image on screen. We'll just quickly talk about this. But there are still humans in Darkmoor, scattered to the winds and small caravans to best protect themselves from the monsters that now rule their world. Always on the move, these outsiders spend every night in fear of vampires, werewolves, and any other things that hunt in the dark. They are the last vestige, hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, of Darkmoor's original society. They strive constantly to not only preserve their lives, but their culture and their souls. So, kind of interesting seeing. I was hoping that we were gonna get some sort of teaser related to humans. I was like, how are we gonna have all this but just no humans at all, whatnot? But hey, that exists. You guys let me know your thoughts and opinions about that as well in the comment section down below before I talk about this whole other stuff. But kind of glad that they at least had some sort of post talking about humans, and I'm kind of intrigued to see what all this faction stuff's gonna happen with all these humans, everything like that. Very interesting to see. Hopefully the humans can all work in, hopefully all the faction can just work completely all fine in unison by the end of Darkmoor. We'll have to see about that. That's all the balance users we got. Definitely watch the original video, as I said in the description. Definitely give the original creator some support. But I wanted to elaborate on a little bit more and give you guys a little bit more knowledge and explain how that whole system works, because it is confusing. It is confusing. It's different per school, and there's going to be a lot more things to talk about, especially even when I go over mine as well, you know, on Sunday. So look out for that, and there's going to be a lot of videos coming out this week, a lot of stuff that I have to record, and hopefully we're all ready for Darkmoor around the corner. But that is it for me. Leave a like, subscribe, all type of stuff. Put all your thoughts and opinions down below. Definitely will be reading them. I do always read them, and it does help me look at what your guys' feedback is. And it's really interesting to see what you guys think. But that is it for me. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys.